interested in comparative studies of collective memory, the built environment, and migration. A longtime resident of the neighborhood and tour leader for the Lower East Side Jewish Conservancy, she has close relationships to synagogues and other Lower East Side communities. Her mother was born on the Lower East Side, and her father works on Cherry Street. In the 1970s, she chose to live here with her husband, Professor Jonathan Boyarin, a well-known Jewish anthropologist and ethnographer. They have raised their children to love the Lower East Side and believe that retaining its historic buildings is important to keeping it as a livable neighborhood with an enduring legacy. Ellisa Sampson.
So I'm going to start here by saying I see people from communities, and that's a really good thing. And it's a variety of communities. I see peer people that I daven with. I see people here that I walk the streets with. I see people here that sometimes I advocate for buildings with. And I just see people who are part of this neighborhood and care enough about a building they may or may not know a lot about, but they know it's part of their world today, and they don't want that world to disappear, and that's why they're trying to learn about that world in the past. So what I'm trying to do today is bring this building into a dialogue with what I think it might have been trying to do when it was erected in 1930, and try to bring that dialogue into a discussion of what we're going to do about being a community today and preserving our past. If I don't speak loud enough or I speak too fast, somebody just raise their hand and that's that. Okay? So I come from here and that's the way I speak. Okay. You know the name of the building, right? What is it? We got it. Now, Joyce is going to kill me. But I used a quote from one of the architectural historians who's written a wonderful letter to the Landmark Preservation Commission, because some of his quotes I thought were really very smart, and some of them I thought you might hear from other speakers as well as myself, are places in which people who look at buildings can agree to disagree, which means it's the Lower East Side. 2 people, 20 opinions. Okay. So architecturally, the building is a rare example of Art Deco design in the neighborhood. Now, if you took the word rare out, I would be a little happier, but I absolutely agree it's Art Deco. So let's talk a little bit about this question of dialogue and modernism, because that is a lot of what Rebecca was hinting at. People from Bialystock, some of them were poor. They certainly were immigrants. But everybody in this room knows that doesn't mean A, they didn't have opinions, and B, that they weren't sophisticated, and that they weren't in a dialogue themselves with the question of modernism, modernity, and what the hell do you do when you're in America. This question of identity is not just a question of the past, it's a question of the present. That's why we look to preserve buildings, because we know when a building comes down, we lose part of ourselves. And these people from Bialystock had a certain sophistication to them. One that sometimes scholars don't always give to immigrants, today or in the past. This is a Deco building. Now, how do we know this is a Deco building? So I'm going to read to you what another scholar has to say to explain what Deco is. It is streamlined. It has rakish forms. It has geometric shapes and zigzags and conductive curves and smooth surfaces. And curling around the building, you're going to find ledges, jagged spires, flat roofs, geometric friezes, highly stylized sans serif. Certainly we got a highly stylized lettering over here. And often that you're going to get what I would call the figure of the new man, stemming really from a classical heritage. And we're going to talk a little bit about this question of a classical heritage, because there is a little trick that these immigrants from Bialystock do to Art Deco. They are very much engaged with Art Deco, and Art Deco in New York, which means that it is tall and it has step backs, and we'll look a little bit at that. But they're going to change some things about it. How interested do you think people from Bialystocker are in things like Aztec and Mayan heritage? Just as a guess, in 1929-30. Not terrifically. All right, so we have a problem because Deco is very stylized, and Deco looks at things like, you know, the zigzag, among other things, and horizontal and vertical lines, right? And it tries to have floral patterns and sunbursts, but it refers basically to three different types of paths, typically. And it's a type of modernism. Different than Bauhaus and Art Nouveau, though it's related to these things. One path is the Aztec and the Mayan. Another is what I call a classical path, and that I'm going to call the Greco-Roman or the Hellenistic. We're not going to do too well in Bialystocker that path as well. It's not quite as exotic, if you will, as Aztec and Mayan stuff, but it's not that familiar either, whether you're in Europe, Buenos Aires, here, if you're an immigrant, such as well. So, we're looking at Deco buildings that emphasize geometry, and we need to find a different path. Lori, for instance, will tell you, and everybody else here who does synagogue tours or has read Joyce's book, that often they explain to people that when they're looking at a building in the Lower East Side, they're looking at a reference to what I call the golden age of Islamic Jewry, or of the thought of Spain. We're looking back at the 9th to the 12th century. And there are other periods that we evoke with our synagogues and our temples, including, for instance, the Second Temple itself and the architectural thing. But now we're a little later on, we're in this Deco period, and Deco is the height of style. It is the style of Paris, and it becomes the style of New York. And the difference between decorative art and architecture is a very funny border here, because the decorative art come into architecture. And it is Macy's, which is owned by what family? Anybody here know? Travis. Ah, and where are we here? Exactly. These immigrants, right, with that sign that Rebecca showed you saying Bialystocker, right, the society that visits and takes care of the ill, the aged, the infirm, the poor. These immigrants are saying that their Bialystocker is worthy of the philanthropy of the Strauss family. That's no small statement for poor immigrants. Certainly you had wealthier landslides or people who came from Bialystock, but the majority of people were poor immigrants. You heard, a lot of them weren't even citizens. Some didn't want to be. Lots didn't even speak English. And yet, they are building something worthy of the Strausses and showing how it should be done in a community that wants to be known, as Rebecca told us, as a place that's seen as taking care of its welfare and that of the larger community around it. It is setting that example. And that example comes from both religious Judaism and other parts of the Jewish tradition. Very hard to say with Judaism exactly what's culture and what's religion. I'm not even going to go there. But this building's up in some ways by combining these topics. So Macy's opens this boutique and takes advantage, right, of Art Deco, and it is the rage. And anybody who has studied the Triangle Fire, when was the Triangle Fire? 1911. Perfect order, right? Okay, the Triangle Fire. What were all those strikers known for in 1909? What were the girls known for being flamboyant about? It wasn't staying in their politics. It was something much worse. Their hats. They wore flamboyant hats. They were immigrants. They had their own idea of style. They were either ahead of the curve, behind the curve, whatever you want to say it. They were the fashionistas of their time because they created those garments themselves. So these people are aware of Deco as being the raging parents in New York. Macy's and the Strauss family, which is very visible in the neighborhood, opens this Deco boutique, and all of a sudden, this neighborhood gets Deco. All right, so we see this in Bialystock, and then we're going to see it elsewhere. And because we don't want to do too much in the way of Aztecs and Mayans, right? And the Hellenistic is not really going to work fully here. Who do we get to do? Any guesses? Yes, nice and loud. Assyrian, and they go with one other.
Babylonian.
Babylonian. Right, and we're all Semites. Why are we Semites? Well, anti-Semites said we're Semites. We're not. So, we now have Semitic architecture. All right. I live here in the neighborhood, so you're getting to see a little bit from my building, right? You see what I call the Assyrian moment over there. Everybody get to see it, right? With the various animals, and animals, by the way, are very big on Deco, right? We get animals with the organic representation of Art Deco, exotic cats and fleet, and that is from Asala. Okay, my building, you get to see a little bit of the gold ceiling. I live in Egelwood. And that is the National Yiddish Arts Theater on 12th Street and 2nd Avenue, with Thomas Shesky and Maurice Schwartz and everybody else, right, who earned a living in Yiddish theater, spent time. That's a little different, but I'm saying that there's a precursor here as well. In other words, when we go from that Neo-Moorish moment to the Babylonian Assyrian trend, it's a bridge in some ways, in terms of looking exotic and yet being part of a noble past that is seen as associated with Judah. Next week. Okay, we're back to the architectural historian, anonymous here. So he wrote, or she wrote, the sign announcing Bialystocker. Here we have English letters written out as if they were Yiddish script. Any disagreement? Okay, it could be Hebrew script too, right. Why? Why could it be Hebrew as much as Yiddish? Is there any difference? No. Well, not a little strict though. What an amazing statement about immigration and assimilation as Yiddish becomes English and immigrants become American. Now think about what you heard from Suzanne and what you heard from Rebecca. Are we talking about a neighborhood in which people say, yes, I want to be American? Are we talking about a neighborhood in which people are saying things like, I'm Jewish. I'm an immigrant. I care about where I'm from. My yippit. My family's relationship. I'm important. Not because necessarily I'm descended from the Baal Shem Tov or the Vilna Gaon or some famous rabbi, but because I come from a place like Bialystock. Anybody here know people from Vilna? Okay, see a few hands. They have much more attitude than Bialystock. Okay? That's Yerushalayim Galician. So, this is the Galiciana here, excuse me, right? But I'm telling you that Bialystock is not unique in having what you might call pride and attitude and transnational migration, in which they are supporting social networks in many places based on the idea of a shared identity, and in that shared identity, they are in a dialogue with modernism, and they are changing modernism in terms of the motifs and its uses. This is not a passive use. They are changing the built environment, much the way the Forward building or the Forward newspaper building changed the built environment of Lower East Side. Okay, so I call these Jewish gates. Somebody here who knows a little Hebrew, please explain why I might say a term like that to describe Bialystock. I see people here I go to shul with, so no excuse. Surely, why might I call these Jewish gates? They're gates, they're portals,
I mean, in Gemara we talk about gates,
Ladder.
this, that. In the Talmud, you talk about, some of the tractates are known as gates, entrances.
Ah, so even if the building is not a religious building, we have a large degree of Jewish literacy that is being brought into a dialogue, a literate, informed dialogue with modernism. And we need those resources today, and we can see them in this building. And look at these gates. What symbols do we have to these Sharei Shemayim? And what reference did I just make? I need somebody else from the shul community. What are these Sharei Shemayim? Mendy, come on. Translate for me. What's Sharei Shemayim?
Gates of heaven.
The gates of heaven. Ah, they're saying these gates are important. Now, any architect for this school is going to tell you a portal or gate's important. But what does the Sharei Shemayim suggest to you? Surely it suggested the Talmud, Jewish gates. What does it suggest to you, Sharei Shemayim?
The way to live your life to get to the promised land.
Okay. The way to live your life to get to the promised land. These are the gates of righteousness in some ways. It's giving tzedakah, it's giving charity, it's being known of taking care of your own. Whether or not they're next door in the neighborhood, or they're in the city that you come from. Yes, the way you get to heaven on earth. Because Judaism is a very earthly type of religion for those who haven't noticed yet. Okay, so these gates, no, it's here, it's just there. Okay, anybody recognize this one? I hear some voices. Anybody recognize it? No. I can tell you it's not Stanley Street, but it is for sure.
8th Street.
No, but that's a good one, Bedford. Ellisa. A shtetl, not like the other stuff. And it's now the Ukraine, but it wasn't. All right. So this says pleasant here, right? Somebody's going to translate my English here. Anybody volunteering to translate English? Pleasant here by the Padiatsa, ladies auxiliary. How much of a translation do you need? Okay, so that's a gate. And that's telling you something about charity. Next, please. Okay, this is a gate. Anybody know this gate? It's not in the Lower East Side, and it's in Hebrew. I want somebody to go for the Hebrew and use the euphemism here. Jay, can you see it from there?
Barely, it's trying to in the right.
No, this is Hebrew, not Yiddish. Ein, come on.
Is that a lamed or is that a resh?
Key. Okay. These are the gates, right, of Elohim, of God. And this is when Jacob is wrestling with his ladder and his angels. And this is when Temple Emmanuel, which is from the Lower East Side, Rand Street, right, the first Temple Emmanuel, the German Jews were here before the Eastern Europeans, whatever people think, right? German Jews in the Lower East Side merged two buildings, Temple Emmanuel and Temple Beth El. And these are the gates to Beth El in 65th Street and 5th Avenue. And they are saying, actually, in Hebrew, as opposed to Bialystocker, which is using English, they are saying these are the gates for God, from Jacob's blessing. Now, we're going to do a very, very fast iconography, because otherwise my board will, I guess, will go off the stage. So, very fast. Okay, Menashe and Ephraim. Okay, you get to see Bialystock, and you get to see Temple Emmanuel. Stop. Right? The snake. Keep on going. All right, we have here Benjamin as a wolf, and we have God at his tent. Ellisa, what are these? These are 12 tribes. Each of them has an individual blessing from Jacob in an iconography. And I can, sorry?
Are they
They're on the Bialystocker gate. That first picture that Rebecca showed you is on that gate. And these are actually the pictures for that gate. They are very, very similar to the ones in Temple Emmanuel, which get put up in 1929 in bronze, in deco, with a lot more money. Okay? And the Bloomingdales and the Macy's families are involved. Okay, we got Shiven, right? We have Reuben. By the way, part of the reasons that they're so distinctive is the iconography here is very different in most places in how you depict this. And this is religious iconography that's being appropriated more generally. But what I am saying here is that also some of Jacob's blessings to his children are difficult blessings. And for the first three sons, it's so difficult that having that iconography is incredibly diverse. How do you deal with Shimon? How do you deal with Reuben? How do you deal with Levi? Is something that's going to be very variable depending on your reading of Jewish tradition, and people can find me afterwards to explain. As fast as possible now. Okay, so we have Levi, and we have Judah. That's one thing that's typical of Judah being a lion, right? We have Asher. And then we have, at Bialystocker, we have a camel. That suggests to me people are looking at the Middle East. Now, I'm going to thank you all for your time and your interest in Jewish iconography and this building, but I'm mainly going to thank you for coming together as a community to learn about past communities and their interests, and to understand that they didn't just create a building, they created something amazing. Thank you.
We are all going to have the opportunity to go out after the panel with Ellisa, and she'll take us to the front of the building where you can see what she's been talking about, and you can actually touch the medallion. You know, when you're in a museum, they don't let you touch everything that's on the street. You can feel, and when you feel it, it becomes more part of you. We're going to conclude. The concluding speaker is Mitchell Grubler. Mitchell Grubler is a community activist